Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Monday. It is September the 23rd, and we are rolling live on Rumble, on X, on Facebook, and so on. If you're joining us live, thanks for joining us live. We appreciate that. I do, at least. It's 0930 Eastern Time. If you've never caught our show live, you're missing out on a fantastic chat over on Rumble. And you can also join us on Locals. You can do so by going to kyleseraphin.com. It's kyleseraphin.com. It's very easy to remember. Our Locals community, I do get off social media every weekend. I sign out at some point in time on Friday because it's toxic and gross. But I stay around on Locals and I share some thoughts. Any of you guys that are on there know that we did some penny counting. We did some quarter counting. I found some silver coins because our money has been debased since 1964. The Congress decided that our money was worth too much money for the money that it was. And I managed to find a couple of like silver dimes. I found a war nickel in all of our stuff. If you guys want to hear about things like that, you can join us on Locals. We also talk about some other things, but that was just this weekend's sort of musings on money. Make sure you guys are checking us out over there. And I want to thank all of you for being part of the program. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff today. Mostly, we're getting into the government shutdown, which is not going to shut down because Mike Johnson caved. Do you remember months and months and months ago when I said that we should have no one for speaker so that nobody could introduce any of these funding bills that would bankrupt the American people? But more importantly, it would bankrupt my children's America and your grandchildren's America. Do you remember that? That was a real decision that we, as a country, kind of failed on. And now we're getting the consequences of it. The consequences are Mike Johnson has revealed a short-term spending, which is a continuing resolution, which is essentially saying cowardice is king in Washington, D.C. Republicans are terrified that they will be blamed for a government shutdown, which we knew. And so they're going to drop all of their principles, as usual, and they are going to allow the government to continue, as it was, with more money for agencies that are actually doing things poorly. Go figure. Got a bunch of other stuff I want to cover down on, some Trump stuff. We're going to talk about the shooter or the would-be shooter from West Palm Beach. Mostly I want to talk about that because I don't want that story to drop. And we need to continue to cover it. We're going to talk about school shootings. We're going to talk about something called the Dirty Birmy. You guys know about Birmingham? I didn't know this was a thing, but apparently my buddies do. What else are we going to talk about? Corruption in the NYPD. I'm going to give at least you a primer or a quick touch on that, which we want to get into. And the United States Navy letting us know that they are a serious fighting force. I used to be really kind of in awe of the Navy, even as the Air Force. The Navy is like the Air Force of the ocean, isn't it? And they have aircraft carriers, like the single most capable fighting platform to really project strength around the globe. They also apparently now have a submarine that's called the Jersey Girl. So that's good. We're really interested in gender equality in the Navy, not making the most capable fighting force. Kind of hard to stomach if you're a veteran, especially if you're a Navy veteran, especially if you're on the pointy end of what the Navy does. In any case, let's get it kicked off right now. We're going to say thanks to our sponsor. Particularly this one is My Patriot Supply. Folks, I don't need to tell you that life is precious and that it can be taken away. Most of you probably have that instinct, and that's why we keep the 4-week emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply in our home. We have many of them to be able to feed ourselves. It's got everything that a family needs during a crisis, over 2,000 calories per day. There's enough to go around during times of social unrest. Government crackdowns, God forbid, an attack on the homeland. It lasts up to 25 years, so you can hold on to it in case disaster strikes. You don't have to burn through it. We've seen mass panic in our lifetimes, and if you're not preparing, then you're getting ready to repair, and it will be ugly. I'm not going to take my family's safety for granted. Neither should you. Right now, you can get $50 off the 4-week emergency food kit at My Patriot Supply. Go to Prepare Like Kyle, the website, preparelikekyle.com. It is the featured product, $50 off. This week is the last week for that 4-week emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. They'll send it over quickly. They ship very quickly. And it only took, a very short period of time for it to show up at our house. I know that I ordered it, and then immediately there was a UPS truck blocking my driveway. Preparelikekyle.com. Go to preparelikekyle.com. Get yourself squared away. It's coming, whatever it is. I think we all know it. It's not going to be good. You know what's not coming, though? This guy. This is what I opened up my day with. I go to CNN's webpage. The bottom thing you see there. The top is the actual article. Speaker Johnson unveils short-term spending bill, urges members to avoid government shutdown. Why? Because they're terrified of being blamed for government shutdown because they think that Republicans actually want the government to run. I would say shut it all down. I'm going to show you some funny things from an article dated from last year about what happens if there is a government shutdown. It's going to talk to us a little bit about financial readiness, which maybe is something I've been thinking about since I realized that if you there's this meme that goes around, and you guys may have seen this already. It shows you 5 coins from 1964. They're all quarters. And it says in 1964, the minimum wage was 5 quarters. It actually was $1.15. In 1964, the minimum wage for the United States was $1.15. And if you paid that, you could pay it with 5 quarters, right? That'd be $1.25. But the value, the melt value of the 90% silver that was in those coins would now be roughly $28. It's a little bit shy of $28, but it's 22.5 times more than the face value of a dime, 22.5 times the face value of a quarter. On any given day, that moves a little bit because the price of silver fluctuates. But the melt value of that would make our minimum wage essentially what? Like closer to $30 an hour, which means that you could actually do things with it. I mean, that's a pretty sizable wage, $30 an hour, $28 an hour, $25 an hour. That's a solid professional wage. So it's interesting to think about how much they've debased it. And a lot of it is because they keep staying open and they keep funding. They're printing off money to do their government programs, which is why the main webpage, the landing page for CNN today said Democratic leaders praise Johnson's bill that would avert shutdown. I grabbed both the article and the main page, and the main page gives away the game. When the Democrat leaders are praising the Republican Speaker of the House for his bill, you know we lost. Everybody lost. The uniparty agrees, and the American people are the losers, including people who vote Democrat because they just don't understand what's going on here. This is Lauren Fox and Haley Talbot reporting a 3-minute read from CNN. They've laid out a plan to avert the government shutdown. He put the letter out yesterday. It contains a limited continuing resolution that would fund the government until December 20th. In other words, kick the can across the finish line to make sure that we get through the election. And it would include another $230 million for the Secret Service. What's that all about? We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, because it's not just Secret Service. You've got a failing agency that can't do its job, that's not going to protect Donald Trump and continues to do a mediocre job at best. And you're going to give him another $230 million. Why not? Why not? That's in addition to the normal funding levels, right? The House will take on the initiative and pass a clean. A clean means it's not going to secure the elections, which is what was actually supposed to be at stake. They were supposed to be having this showdown about illegal aliens voting in the election. And rather than do the thing that they said they would do, that they told the American people that to do, that they campaigned on doing, they're quitting. They're weak. And they've done exactly what you expect them to do, which is say, this is not the fight. This reminds me of this little group that fired Steve Friend the other day. Steve's not on the program, so I'm going to talk about him without asking him what he thinks about this. But I'm fairly confident that I'm representing the opinion properly. He worked for a think tank called the Center for Renewing America. And it's founded by a guy named Russ Vaught, who used to be at the Office of Budgetary Management, I think think that's what it's called. He's one of these Trump hanger-oners that's old and bald, white, weak, wears glasses, and is interested in policy. And every single time it comes down to the moment when they should make a decision that would be difficult and they should do actual advocacy for conservative principles, they cave. Because as Steve was able to see from the inside, and I'm sure you guys will be able to see shortly because that's just how these things work, the Center for Renewing America, a full-on Trump think tank that used to have Kash Patel as part of it, by the way. I'm going to play a video of Kash Patel, and I like Kash Patel a lot. Kash is no longer associated. It hasn't been there for like a year and a half because these people don't have any balls. They are feckless cowards. And what they do is they decide this is not the fight that we're going to go. This is not the hill to die on, because if you never fight, then you never lose. And you never have to go back to your donors and say, yeah, we drew a strong line, but we lost this battle. Instead, what they do is they say something like this. We're going to let this one slide. We're going to say that Mike Johnson did the right thing because otherwise we're going to lose access. And if we lose access, then we're not going to be able to advocate for the positions that we need. These people have no function in society. They don't do anything of value. They are the government that we hate. And they consider themselves Republicans and conservatives. The reason that they're all in think tanks is because they're just waiting for their next government job, which is why they don't want to see the government defunded. They don't want to see it shut down because it'd be bad when they are there. It would be like, oh, this would be a bad turn for us if the government wasn't funded because that's how we make a living. Center for Renewing America. You guys asked on social media, who is this group that let Steve go? The reason they let Steve go, so you guys are really clear, as far as I understand it, I'll be open to being corrected later. These people let Steve Friend go because Kyle Seraphin, not Steve Friend, had an opinion about a woman named Julie Kelly. And while I was doing some background research on who this lady was, I reached out to her former employer and now current, again, group that puts out her stories. It's called The Federalist, and it was founded by Sean Davis. Sean Davis looks exactly like Russ Vought if he was like half the age. Sean Davis is another skinny, balding, glasses weakling. And Sean Davis, who everyone thinks is the staunch conservative, I wrote him and I said, hey, did you already know about this? That Julie Kelly was doing donations to Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, was putting money in the pockets of Barack Obama, like her husband and her basically have donated over $143,000 in national sphere, but like over $150,000, like almost $200,000, what I can tell, on the state line, have been giving this kind of money to Democrats over the last 20 years. Did you know that? And he said, if you're running an op on Julie Kelly, I'm out, and blocked me. And then I called him a coward because that's what cowards do. They block you. They're scared of what you have to say. They don't address the facts. That's the same thing that got Steve Friend fired. Yes, my actions and the fact that he wouldn't disavow me. You know, because Steve Friend and I are in this together. This thing where we say the FBI is evil and people who are weak are weak. We speak what we think is true. If that's a problem, then you fire the guy. And they asked him to give up on me. Didn't work. Just want you guys to know that. I'm a little hot on this right now. How to survive a government shutdown. Let's talk about how to survive this. Why do these articles even exist? This is from incharge.org, a debt relief, government shutdown, financial help, advocacy. They are giving you some tips in 2023 at the end of last year. How could you survive a government shutdown? This is all geared towards government workers. It turns out it's not geared towards you. If you work for the government and you haven't figured out how to put your money away, why do you have a security clearance? Why are you in a position of public trust? Why are you taking money from the people who pay? One of the things that I knew right away when I started working for the FBI was that I was responsible for me and that I should not be compromisable to a foreign government or by my own finances. So this is the funniest thing that I've read. I want to just read a couple things off the screen here. The answer to how you survive a government shutdown. See if you can see the trend in this. There are a range of government programs that can provide a safety net during a shutdown, says this guy that they've quoted. You've got unemployment insurance for replacing lost income. You've got Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which is food stamps, for assistance in foods cost, Medicaid to cover medical expenses, and various housing support programs. So that's right. The answer to surviving a government shutdown when you lose your income, if you're a government worker, is a range of government programs. This is the self-licking ice cream cone, folks. This is what happens when the answer to the government shutting down is more government. It's government programs that already exist. And the reason this is so salient and important is because there are apparently only 14% of people that say they can handle an emergency. I think they got this number wrong. Between 100 and $499. So between $1 and $500, they claimed that only 14% of Americans could handle this. This actually conflicts because I'm not sure if this data is right. The Federal Reserve said that 63% of adults could theoretically handle a hypothetical $400 emergency using cash or equivalent. So let's just take it at the best of this. I don't know why they have some bad stats. Sometimes I just read these things and I'm like, oh, this is obviously written for a government audience. People that don't know how to look at two statistics and realize that they are not agreeing with each other. But let's just assume that 35%, 1/3, we'll call it 1/3. We'll give it a generous 1/3 of people are unable to handle it. I think it's actually worse than that. I've seen some other studies saying the same. A $400 emergency. Now imagine you can't get your whole paycheck. That's going to be way more than $400 for most people. One paycheck equals catastrophic results for 1/3 of people. This is why the government needs to shut down. It needs to shut down so that people understand what austerity measures really look like. And that led me to this other really interesting little thing. This is from CBS's Money Watch. Trump is promising new tax breaks for millions of Americans. Again, the government's business is keeping government open. Will his tariffs cover the cost? And I pulled this little piece out of the article here that I found quite interesting. They have some, what's this guy's name? Something Cyberg, but I'm trying to figure out who the first, what is Cyberg's background? Why do they even put that in there? They reference some of these people, they'll reference them and they don't even explain why they're relevant. I'm like scanning through the article and I don't even see who this guy is. Doesn't make a difference really. They asked an analyst whether or not Trump's tax breaks would be covered by the tariffs program. And this is what it says. The estimate that Trump's recent tax break proposal, at least he has proposals, by the way, folks, which is the opposite of the Harris program, they would cost the following. Eliminating income taxes on Social Security would cost the federal government $1.6 trillion. Just put this in your head. Money the government takes from you, puts into a very inefficient government bureaucracy, the Social Security Administration, invests at a rate that returns less than the market, and then gives you back, must be taxed. And if they don't tax it, it will cost $1.6 trillion. This is that backwards way of government thinking. This is the backwards way that politicians have allowed us to talk about these things. Taking a tax cut does not cost the government anything. The government should have to justify all taxes because they're taking your money. And it should be a discussion about what you get for it. And if it turns out what you get for it is a co-ed submarine called the Jersey Girl, they can F right off and stop taking my cash. I would actually forego everything that I put into Social Security since I was 16 years old. I'm 42. I would forego all of that money if I could just keep my own money and invest it my own way. Because I do better things than the government. And so should you. It's a terrible program for just the assumption that Americans are financially illiterate. And it also has to cost a ton because they have all these useless employees working at the Social Security Administration. They've got the people that are in the management. They've got the people on the front lines. They've got people that are processing the checks. They've got people that are wasting. And most of our debt is actually borrowing against Social Security. I think not most of it, but a huge chunk of it, like 40% the last time I looked, was borrowing against Social Security, which is why it's getting bankrupted. We borrow from our own government programs, which are supposed to be your money. That's why it doesn't earn anything. They don't have to make it earn anything. They just pay you this dole out after they've taken your stuff. Scrapping taxes on overtime pay. This is apparently Trump's proposal that you shouldn't have to pay taxes on overtime. That would cost $1.1 trillion over 10 years, except it wouldn't cost anything. What it would say is that they don't get that money and the government would have to do better. Every time a government shutdown comes up, I want it. Specifically because they don't look at money the way that you look at money. It's not theirs. They believe it's theirs with no rights to it. They want to do a SALT deduction. That would be another SALT. It's a program that would cost $1 trillion over a decade. Again, it wouldn't cost anything. Lowering the corporate tax rate, making it more efficient for businesses to use their money to do things. You know, like keep people employed so they don't have to go on SNAP and food stamps. That would cost $673 billion, according to this guy. And if you got rid of tipping wages, most wages right now that are like most tipped wages, If you guys have never worked in a restaurant, the way that it works is this. You pay your bill, especially when you pay it with a credit card, which is most people. The restaurant knows about what you got paid in the credit card. You declare that tip because you have to claim it as you process the credit card. Most credit cards are run for a hold and then processed by the server at the end of the night. At least this is the way it was when I used to work in a restaurant. You would type in the amount that the tip says, and so then the restaurant would know that's the amount of money from that little piece that they would pull out and they would give to you, and then you are taxed on that wage. And by not doing that, the U.S. government would lose out on $250 billion. $250 billion that somebody else earned by doing their job. Most of what the federal government does is not necessary. And the reason you know that is because when the federal government shuts down, most of you never realize it. The only thing that has to happen is that Democrats claim it because a lot of their voting base is, and Republicans give it lip service because they think they might be able to win some of those Democrat voters, even though they can't. Truly incredible stuff. Absolutely insane. And pathetic. Like it's the saddest, stupidest thing. It's also stupid that we're seeing NBC right now crying about who the potential Trump cabinet is, even though all the evidence shows that they're not going to have a fair election, that there are more things coming our way. But the people that will fill that cabinet are people like Russ Vought. They hope. That's why they will bow down to a Mike Johnson's bad decision. That's why they will not push on anything that Donald Trump says that's wrong. And he does say things that are incorrect and that are inaccurate. He makes bad decisions on certain things, like when he was talking about the amendment in Florida for abortion. And there was a populist uprising of people that are actually going to vote for the guy that are like, no. You can't talk like that. Center for Renewing America and the think tanks that are associated that hope to find their way into the Trump cabinet won't do that. There's no real evidence that he's going to go after the hardline conservatives. The Uniparty has been jockeying and lobbying, and they're the ones that have been selected for a transition. So this whole NBC News article is only interesting to me in that NBC thinks that it's a possibility that Donald Trump could be back in the White House. I can't figure out what's going on with that. I really can't. They're talking about how the issue with Hillary Clinton was that everybody was essentially measuring the drapes in Washington, D.C. They had basically preordained that Hillary Clinton was going to take office. And then, sure enough, it's Donald Trump that ends up in there. And so he had this chaotic transition. I would rather have most positions not that filled. It doesn't really matter. The government doesn't do that much for you, which is why it's so crazy when you hear something like a Kamala Harris position talking about how she's going to lower the price of living in America, and she's going to, what is she going to do? She's going to create higher paying jobs. I'm sick of hearing presidents talk like they're the king and that they somehow create anything, because they don't. We need to understand the Constitution of this country. We need to understand what the words actually mean, the way our government is meant to go. We're letting politicians say things that are completely outside of their purview, which is why somebody like Kamala Harris can come out and say that she's for the Second Amendment, but also she's for banning certain types of guns and restricting that. What does that mean? How can you be for the Second Amendment? You don't get to be for or against it. You're already sworn to protect the Constitution. She's the vice president. She was a senator. The oath is pretty clear. It's not like you get to pick and choose what the words mean. The words flippin' mean what they mean. That there is a constitutional right, and it pre-exists the government. The Bill of Rights that comes, like that was the compromise between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. It just acknowledged that there were rights that existed before the government showed up, that the government didn't get to grant them. We keep letting these politicians, including people on the right, by the way, frame the argument in a way that is absurd. And maybe that's why they're so scared of the AI stuff. Should we do some AI things? I've got some fun. I'm going to continue to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to keep talking about the would-be Trump assassin. We would do that first. And I'm going to keep poking the idea that Gavin Newsom thought that he could outlaw AI and deep fakes and comedy and satire and parody. Like the fact that he thought that he could do that. I'm going to continue to play that game. And I hope somebody in California reports it. Because Americans aren't free if they don't acknowledge that their rights pre-exist the government. The First Amendment, it doesn't give you the right. It keeps Congress out of your business and the federal government out of your business in the same way that it's your money and it doesn't cost anything to cut taxes. It just means that the government has to do more with less, or they have to figure out that they can't send money overseas for projects that we don't agree with. It's not their money. It's our money. And when we give it to them, we should expect something out of it. And how do you do that even in today's day? I keep looking at it. It's like, do we just refuse to pay our taxes? Is that the move? You end up like Wesley Snipes. You end up in a debtor's prison. It's a difficult question because there doesn't seem to be a lot of solution to it. Let's keep talking about this guy who tried to kill Trump, who showed up in the bushes, who was hanging out in a place where the media hung out. There's been all this speculation that the fact that he was hanging out in that area indicated that the media leaked to him or that Secret Service leaked to him or the FBI did. Some of you guys sent me some stuff over the weekend and it was saying things like, oh, the FBI set it up and the Secret Service has been working against, and like there's these the white hat teams and the black hat teams and like all the guys, it doesn't have to be any of that stuff. There's a lot of questions about this dude. Let's figure out what they are. I think Jesse Waters actually did a really good job of breaking it down. We had a 2-hour-long conversation with Steve Baker, kind of going down a rabbit hole. And I think this sums up most of the issues. So I want to do a quick recap on who this guy, Ryan Routh, is and why people are so interested. One, it's because he's alive, because he didn't take a bullet to the head. He survived setting up a little sniper's nest next to Donald Trump on the golf course. And two, he's a weird dude. His finances don't make a lot of sense. But there's also a possibility. I'm not going to eliminate this possibility, although the amount of money that he's been able to spend and travel and stuff like that. There's a lot of Americans that live in like crazy amounts of debt. So it's possible that he's just a dude who doesn't know how to use money, uses it for weird stuff, leaves Hawaii, bought a gun on the streets, even though he looks like a 58-year-old cop. Maybe that's the case. It might be an intelligence move. It might be that he's been supported by intelligence agencies and then he came back here and he's operating on his own recognizance, or maybe he was tasked, or maybe any number of things. There's a lot of strange smoke around this dude. I just don't think that the evidence isn't public yet. This is the reason why a public and a publicly accountable investigation by the state of Florida is so important, because we're never going to get it from the FBI. You guys already know that. I've actually been tapping my folks over there and they're like, yeah, it's super tight. They're not sharing anything, as you'd expect. That's the way these things go. Here's Jesse Waters doing a quick recap on this Ryan Routh guy. We're not going to let it drop.
So how'd the citizen of the year with a nice house and a good family turn into an assassin living in a barn with more felonies than money in his bank account? Ruth couldn't even afford child support. Primetime looked into it, and he was always behind on payments to his ex, always. She even agreed to terminate the support due to his financial situation. Ruth sold his house in North Carolina for $174,000 and then was also living in an $800,000 bungalow in Hawaii. How does a man with no money for child support suddenly start living in a pricey house in Hawaii and afford flights to Taiwan, Turkey, Poland, Ukraine? His neighbors say sometimes they wouldn't see him for 3 years. The house in Hawaii Ryan was living with is connected to his fiancée, Kathleen Schaefer. Kathleen worked at Victoria's Secret. She's engaged to this guy who all of a sudden flies to Ukraine for months, and she's fine with that. As we reported last night, Ruth spent 8 months sleeping in Ukrainian military barracks, and he was rubbing elbows with cold-blooded killers. Why would you leave your fiancée, who just lost her job at Victoria's Secret, to fly to Ukraine?
Lots of questions. How about this one? Why would the House GOP leaders decide to give more money to Secret Service that's not doing the job the Secret Service is supposed to do? There's a little piece in this article here that I wanted to call out. It says former President Trump called on the Republicans to shut the government down if the election security bill didn't become law. But Mitch McConnell and Mike Johnson decided no. Again, these are pretty straightforward stuff. By the way, there's more money in there for FEMA. FEMA monies have been used not for emergencies of late, but to house illegal immigrants coming in. So they're paying for the things that you hate. They're giving money to the government agencies that aren't doing the job they're supposed to do. They're running all the ops against you. Meanwhile, that guy is in court and he's going to be arraigned. I think he's supposed to be in court on Wednesday. For gun charges, by the way, not for like potential assassination. I don't know what they've come up with on that. That might take a little while. But he's been arrested. What do they say? He's been charged like 74 different times and never spent a day in jail or never spent a day in prison, which is a different animal. That means convicted and actually served. He was getting probations for explosives and weapon of mass destruction stuff and blah, 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 blah. Steve Baker's reporting is pretty interesting on that. Check that out. I don't know. It doesn't make me feel very hopeful when we know that this is the case. Let me tell you quick about our friends over at Patriot Coolers. If you guys want to support the program and you want a high quality product, if you are in the market, we saw Jesse Kelly the other day saying he'd been thinking about buying a Yeti. Don't buy a Yeti. Get yourself a Patriot cooler. It looks like this. They've got a new one called the Major, which I will have on my desk shortly. This one has Suspendables branded etching, which is really fantastic looking stuff. Very durable. It's a good looking product. It performs. I left actually some iced coffee in mine the other day for the whole day. I totally forgot about it. I prepped it in the morning before I went to church, and I came back and it was like well after noon, and it was still cold. Still had ice in it. PatriotCoolers.com. Use the promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E. K-Y-L-E will save you 10%. PatriotCoolers.com is their website. Get yourself one of these spill-proof 30 ounces or a 20 ounce if you're a little bit smaller, or now the new 40 ounce, which looks monstrous. It's got a handle on it, kind of like a Bubba cup or whatever it is. Great company, great people. We really appreciate them. They've been behind us for a long time, since like February of last year, since the podcast started, and we only had a couple hundred daily listeners and only a few thousand total listens. Really appreciate their support ongoing. Because they're businesses that understand that they want to align themselves with the product. And you guys have gone out there and bought them, and it's made money. That's the way it's supposed to work. Not the weird sort of answers that we get from these folks that don't get it. They're not involved in business. I want to pivot over to something else. Kamala Harris has been talking about Second Amendment, whether or not she's before it or against it, and whether she carries a gun, and whether she would shoot somebody in her house, which her aides have tried to walk back. She was like, let me just, if you come into my house, you're getting shot. It's like, if you come into her house, it's the Naval Observatory right now. I'm pretty sure the Secret Service runs that. So yeah, that's true. But what I'm really interested in is this gun grab opportunity. And a report came out from CBS focusing on hardening the buildings, hardening the schools, because the one thing we get really, really heated about is people going after kids. That's why we don't like the trans movement. That's why we're upset about the concept of kids dying in a school shooting. It is emotionally triggering for most people that are decent. This story says that the data is showing that most mass shootings at schools happen outside of the building. They don't occur inside the physical structure. So if you just close the damn doors and lock it, you will basically eliminate most of the school shootings. Like if you just did the things that people that are conservative talk about, hardening the actual physical place where kids are sitting and the least aware when they're in the middle of classes, it'd be fine. They don't want to turn schools into prisons. They don't want to. It's like, what do you want? You want to create soft zones? The other thing that I see is there's a couple of videos here shown, and all the faces are blurred out, but I can see the bodies. And the most mass shootings happen in the same way the most shootings happen and the most murders happen in this country. There's a huge chunk of them that are taken up by a very small percentage of the population, and it's not all black people, and it's not all black people in this age range. But there's a lot of black on black violence, like the victims and the perpetrators tend to be black, and they're young. They're like 16, 15 to 40 years old. That little age bracket constitutes a huge percentage of the folks that are involved. And a lot of these mass shootings are just gang shootings. They're over drugs. They're over territory. Anybody who's ever worked on this stuff knows exactly what's going on, which led me to this thing that was happening in Birmingham. And I found it fairly interesting by reading the story. My buddy sent it to me, a former ATF agent, another buddy who's an FBI supervisor. It's ABC's story, and it says Birmingham shooting results in multiple casualties. Police say this is coming from yesterday. There were multiple shooters involved in the incident. So this sounds truly horrific. This is another one of these mass shootings. 4 people dead, at least. 17 others injured, at least, on Saturday night in Birmingham. I didn't ever know. One of them called it the dirty Birmy. Is that a thing? If you guys know anything about Alabama, like, do they call Birmingham dirty Birmy? If so, let me know. Otherwise, my friends are weirdos. They released the names of the victims: Anitra Holman, Taj, T-A-H-J, Taj Booker, Carlos McCain were 3 of the 4 victims. They don't have all 4 names. And they said they were looking for a number of suspects, multiple suspects who fired on a large group of people outside of a public area. That's the entirety of the description. The entirety of the description was multiple subjects who fired on a large group of people. So be on the lookout, if you're in Alabama, for multiple suspects who fired on a large group. Why are there no descriptions of who these people are? You think that the people that were involved didn't know? They claimed that it was a targeted hit. There's another piece on that. They believe that it was a targeted shooting. There was a targeted individual among the dead that was being pinpointed, that it was an assassination attempt on this person, whoever it was. No descriptions. I guess that's the fourth person that's not being named. There's heartfelt condolences and no descriptions. Why do we keep doing this? Why does the American news media run away from the facts of these stories so that they don't cover them in any way, shape, or form? Renzo Rant's coming up in the chat. Yeah, because they're all black. Yeah, I get that they're all black or they're all Hispanic, that the violence is coming from a very narrow group of people, the most prominent violence that the news wants to cover down on. That's not to say that white people don't do crimes. Of course they do. And violent crimes. Of course they do. I've been involved in investigations on that as well. But there's certain narratives where they are very quick to put the face up there and let you know who it is. And there are some that the media is terrified of reporting honestly. And if they did, then Americans would have just a real clean picture of what's happening. And it's like, okay, in certain areas, particularly heavy urban areas, a lot of them run by Democrats. These are just facts. You've got a lot of angry people that are killing other people that are probably Democrat voters. Why don't we show that? Why can't we be honest about it? That's why I think the AI stuff is damaging. It's damaging to the political left. It's damaging to the Gavin Newsom types. They don't want to acknowledge just the reality of the situation on the ground, because if you acknowledge it, then you would have a bunch of people go, okay, that's the problem. Let's look at solutions. Let's talk about them honestly. Let's not run away from this. Let's just say what it is. So I got kind of a fun little video of Gavin Newsom trying to straighten it out for the record. This is Gavin being honest. It's nice to see him do that every once in a while. Again, as California goes, so goes the nation in many, many ways. And this is a good look at it.
Good evening, California. I come to you tonight to impart a few words of wisdom upon you. First, not all pee-pee times are poo-poo times, but all poo-poo times are pee-pee times. Second, anything can be a dildo if you try hard enough. And lastly, the poop map is real and it's spectacular.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. Have you guys seen the poop map, by the way? This is California's most beautiful shining city historically, San Francisco. You can't see it because it's covered by little brown dot marks. And those dot marks, looks like thousands of them, are where poop is on the peninsula. You can see Daly City right there at the bottom. You can see Oakland and the East Bay. You can see that bridge, the Bay Bridge. The Golden Gate is the one that's just up there, that's just tucked away underneath Sausalito. Sausalito, rather, sorry. And then you've got this just mass of turds that are being marked. The poop match is real, and it's spectacular. It's poop on top of poop on top of poop. And it didn't used to be like that. It hasn't been like that in my lifetime. Even in my adult lifetime, it wasn't that way. So when you can't call the problem out, when you have to hide from the problem, then you end up with a bigger problem. You end up with more poop on top of more poop. So maybe that's why they make humor illegal. Maybe that's why they have to outlaw this kind of stuff. We obviously that was the AI, right? And we wanted to make sure that we didn't just leave it at that. I've got another little bit. There's the only thing we can do is laugh at this point in this country. I'll get darker in a second, but we're getting the week started off. Let's have a little bit of a chuckle as we get going on. It's too hard to take this stuff full bore at full speed. This is some more Gavin Newsom, because why not?
In a first in the United States, California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed into law a bill that will make certain uses of artificial intelligence illegal, with penalties ranging from fines to even jail time in some cases. Joining me today to discuss this new law is none other than the Governor of California himself, Gavin Newsom, as well as US Constitution expert Huck Flenner. Welcome to both of you, and I'm happy to have this important discussion here today. Governor Newsom, a few days ago, you signed into law a comprehensive AI bill to protect people from political disinformation. Some have criticized you, saying that such a law is unconstitutional. What was your reasoning, and what do you say to your detractors?
Thanks for having me, Pierce, to discuss this important issue. AI disinformation is a real threat to our democracy, and it's my opinion that purposeful misinformation should be confined solely to the mainstream media. America functions better when people have less rights, not more.
Huck, you're an expert on the United States Constitution. What do you think when you hear laws like this being passed?
Thanks, Piers. First off, I'd like to use my First Amendment right to tell Governor Newsom to go fuck himself on behalf of all the American people. Pardon my French laundry. I know he wishes this was France or the UK or North Korea, where me saying that would be illegal, but let's not forget this is the same guy that locked everyone in their homes during COVID while dining at upscale restaurants with his elitist friends. Under his watch, you can't walk around San Francisco without stepping in human shit. In all due respect, he's in way over his head, and this is a terrible law.
I am the law. And Huck, the First Amendment has limitations, and the Founding Fathers could have never predicted AI or anything that is happening right now.
Oh, weird, because I have a bunch of the Founding Fathers in my group chat right here, and they're all telling me to tell you to go fuck yourself, which is how they intended the First Amendment to be used, Gavin, so take your commie bullshit back to England, you tea-sipper.
Huck, please refrain from insulting Governor Newsom. There's nothing wrong with a nice cup of tea. Plus, he's clearly just trying to protect democracy from an easily influenced segment of the population that is too stupid to know what's real and what's fake, but still gets to vote in elections.
I mean, fact check that one, folks. I love that the guys from the Boys Cast are just putting this stuff out. It was inundating my feed. I'm not on social media, but when I get back in, like, that's the blasted stuff that I get. We all should be feeling that way. FU is right. Calling somebody a tea sipper. The tea goes in the harbor. The Founding Fathers, it doesn't matter what they imagined. We've gotten so far away from what it is that they would have tolerated. It's amazing that we still have this country working. And that's why when people tell me, oh, it's going to all end if Donald Trump doesn't get elected. No, it's all been going downhill. It'll continue to go downhill. It's okay. We have to continue to lampoon these people. What a lot of us realized is that more and more people are fed up with it, but a lot of people are still scared of saying what they think. How many of you would be talking to somebody in 2020, let's say, and if they brought up that there was an election, that you wouldn't want to say who you voted for or who you would be willing to vote for? And how many of you are in the kind of the FU attitude at this point? Probably most of you. That's a good thing. We're reaching that critical mass. It doesn't mean that we're going to have a reasonable election. What it means is the American electorate, overwhelming, is not completely illogical and ridiculous. And although there are plenty of dumb people in this country, and there really are, if you've ever gone out and dealt, I had an FBI supervisor one time that said, Kyle, when you start going out and meeting people like in the world, like as an FBI agent, you'll realize there's a lot of like really weird people. It's like, lady, I used to run on an ambulance. What the hell are you talking about? I used to work in an emergency room. I saw the weirdest people in the world. I saw a 400-pound man come in with hemorrhoids that we had to like pull his butt cheeks apart and slice open. Like, I've seen weird. Don't get that twisted. There's plenty of weird, and there's plenty of bad ideas out there, but they have the exact same vote that you do, which is probably why we're in this situation. So yes to AI, and yes to humor, and yes to all the informations. Malinformation, who cares? The government doesn't get to weigh in on it. Remember what the words actually meant. This week on Wednesday, I think Marcus Allen and Tristan Levitt from Empower Oversight, but Marcus Allen, formerly with the FBI, the SOS, who went out and testified in May of last year with Garrett and Steve Friend. Like they went out and got to say some things. He's going to go back and be vindicated. How many people are going to go like, oh man, that's incredible. Now we know. No, this is going to move the needle. It's not going to be some guy who sits down and says articulate things in front of a congressional hearing. We're not going to see that. You have to hit them where they're at. You got to make fun of them. We also want to be accurate, though. We want to make sure that we're being accurate, that we are not saying things that are disingenuous on purpose. So we ended the show the other night on Friday morning, I guess. We ended it talking about the goats exploding, and I wanted to issue a correction about the exploding goat thing because that actually was AI. That was actually a joke. So we want to straighten this stuff out. Like I said, humor all the time. Accuracy, it still takes precedent. Jake Tapper actually issued a statement. You're going to be shocked. Jake Tapper went on CNN to correct the statement about the goat thing that he didn't do because it was AI.
Yesterday, a video from comedian Danny Polishchuk went viral that used artificial intelligence in my face to make it seem like Israel had planted explosives inside the rectums of goats, which were then detonated when thousands of members of Hezbollah became intimate with those goats. While humorous, here at CNN, we are very concerned with the proliferation of any fake news that we didn't create ourselves. Disinformation is a very serious threat to our country and the world when it isn't us here at CNN creating it. We acknowledge the average person on the internet is too stupid to tell the difference between parody and reality. And if it was up to us, none of those people would ever be allowed to vote. Some of you might be thinking this video is AI and you would be incorrect. This is a totally real thing that me, trusted journalist Jake Tapper, would totally say for realsies.
For realsies, he would say that. So that's what happened. Yeah, I'm still playing with you guys. Why am I setting this up? Because we're in unserious times and we have this going on. This came from Daily Wire. Jill Biden apparently hosted a cabinet meeting. There are two things that are pretty wild about this. Okay. So First Lady Jill Biden was slammed on social media on Friday afternoon when I was off because she participated in the first cabinet meeting that the Biden-Harris administration held in nearly a full year. Joe Biden introduced his wife and he said, "This is the first time Jill has joined us, and it goes to show how important the issue is, which she's able to speak about. It's all yours, kid." Maybe that's because there's an enormous age gap between the two of them and an enormous capabilities gap when it comes to the intellect. Yeah. Jill Biden hosted the cabinet meeting. Fox said this. Actually, a Fox host said this. "I'm unsure which part is more disturbing." I shared these exactly like this is like reading out of my head. "I'm unsure which part is more disturbing. One, that the White House held its first cabinet meeting in a year. Or two, that Joe Biden is the one who's leading that meeting. And it's the first one in a year." For all of us who've been thinking that she's the shadow behind the throne, that she's the one that's out there that is that's actually running the show and she didn't want to let go of power, I don't know what this shows other than that, but it seems to show exactly that. And somebody hit me up and said, "Kyle, does this first lady have a security clearance? Is she even able to be in these meetings?" It's a good question because it threw me for a loop. So I found an article for you because I want to be responsive to questions that are interesting to me and you. It's from news.clearancejobs. ClearanceJobs is it's like Indeed.com or one of those employment sites, but it's for people who have security clearances. Not Kyle Seraphin, by the way, not Steve Friend, not Garrett O'Boyle. Marcus Allen could go there and find a good job. And they did an article in 2021. This is in the first year of Joe Biden's presidency. That's why you see a picture of Jill Biden standing by the seal of the President of the United States of America. And the question is, does the First Lady have a security clearance? Written by very, very serious person, Lindy Kaiser. I say that because this example and the stuff that you're seeing on the screen is how serious she is. The FLOTUS, or the First Lady of the United States, is in a unique position to receive classified information. Most spouses of security clearance holders are not privy to the classified details of their spouse's job. Most clearance holders are well trained on what details they can disclose and what they can't. Except Charles McGonigal, who didn't give it to his wife. He shared information with a girlfriend and then also with people that were foreign spies. Whatever. And quite frankly, most classified information, this is how I know she's serious, most classified information is so boring, the average spouse wouldn't want to know it. It's true and not true. The reason that things are classified is not because of what the information is, it's because how it was obtained and what it would say about the sources and methods that you could obtain it. This thing is actually how I know how serious she is as well. A key sign of a braggart or a liar or a security risk is someone who spends a lot of time talking about all of the sensitive programs they work on that they quote unquote can't tell you about. If you've ever been at dinner, whether it be on a date or whether it be sitting across the table from somebody at a family thing where they're telling you about how secret their security clearance is, it's awful. And Lindy said, if you find this person on Tinder, swipe left. I'm not on Tinder. I've never been on Tinder. I don't know what Tinder is, really. I don't know what swipe left means. It sounds like skip. That's my guess. That's from the context clues. But yeah, skip the person that tells you about their security clearance. But also, what we have to remember is, and the main point of this article, is that Jill Biden doesn't need a security clearance because her husband can make the ultimate decisions. For all of you that are going to go out there and talk about the Mar-a-Lago case and the fact that Donald Trump was the president and therefore he has the plenary power to classify or declassify, to read in or not read in, to keep or to dispose of, to determine what is and what is not classified. That's true as far as we understand it, most of the case law. And more importantly, that means that Joe Biden can invite his wife and read her in on the spot on anything he wants. So she doesn't need a security clearance. She doesn't need to be vetted. That's the nature of the executive branch. That's the nature of the executive power. It doesn't take anything away from the fact that it's absolutely terrifying that this is the person theoretically in charge of the country. And more importantly, it's actually his wife who's running the show, as demonstrated by an actual cabinet meeting, and that they've waited 12 months to have one. Maybe that's good for us. For if you're a shut down the government kind of person, it's probably better that they're not out there hatching plans. Then again, we've seen how good Joe Biden is at things. So if they're just running it unilaterally without anybody advising him, maybe that's why we get some of the awful takes that we've had. We did a little bit about California. I also want to talk about New York just a tad bit, and then we'll do our story about the United States Navy, since we're doing kind of a panic fest as we start off. This one's kind of interesting. If you guys follow my friend Sal Greco, he's been on our program. It was just kind of a background on who he was. He's a friend of Roger Stone, and that's how he got thrown out of the NYPD. He's been like a bloodhound on this story, and he's been calling it for quite a while. The story of a place called Con Sofrito, which is a bar that was in the Bronx. It was run by a guy who was an actual mobster and was associated with Eddie Caban, who was the New York police commissioner. I think I'm getting this correct. If you guys are really interested, make sure you let me know in the comments if you want to have Sal Greco back on. He can break this whole thing down. If enough of you are interested in New York corruption, then we'll do it on. But the federal agents and the FBI particularly raided the interim NYPD commissioner supposedly about old documents. But the bigger piece is that there's this indication that it's open season. There's been multiple people that are facing investigations, including Mayor Adams. The FBI has basically been running a multi-year political influence public corruption case. Has to do with foreign governments. It has to do with a lot of money. It has to do with hanging out with gangsters and mobsters. It has to do with people carrying guns that have no right to carry a gun under New York City and state law. It sounds like a real mess. But what it tells me is that there are an awful lot of messy things when you get behind the curtain, particularly in the Democrat cities. And a lot of them are tied in nationally. If you guys want to hear what Sal Greco has to say about this stuff, you can follow more on the NYPD. You can definitely jump on his timeline. I'm going to just call out the fact that it was there. And he sent me a letter today showing that this investigation is ongoing. This kicked off right around the time that Eric Adams started calling the Biden administration for the illegal immigration. First, they said we're a home and a sanctuary city. And then they kind of turned when they realized what it meant to have all those illegal aliens in their city and that it was going to make it difficult for him to get reelected. And so, yes, there's a lot of issues here, including Letitia James, who has been known to hang out in the same place and rub shoulders with the same people. New York politics are kind of a cesspool from what I can tell. And Saul's been kind of like hanging on this thing pretty tight because it does have some national implications. So if you guys are more interested, let me know. And if you just want to follow him, it's at the Sal Greco. I recommend you guys do that. But the FBI getting involved, DHS getting involved, not a good sign for these people. It just shows you what happens when you go against the regime. Another thing that's been kind of tracking over here is going on in North Carolina. If you guys are in North Carolina or aware of what's going on in that race, Mark Robinson running for governor. And he had this scandal break, I guess on Friday or over the weekend, about maybe some ancient, like decade-old message board posts talking about being a Nazi, talking about loving trans porn and some other kind of silly stuff. Staffers are abandoning ship. I don't know enough about this guy to really care. Like the things he said are not offensive, but his campaign seems to be in a bad spot and he's got people jumping off the ship. And in any case, NBC is crowing about it. You guys can know we keep getting these people into office. We keep getting these people that are running for office. When you dig up something that old, one, it kind of tells me that there's some desperation. Two, it tells me like that I'm very suspicious. Maybe he's a creep. Maybe he's not. I like the things that I've heard him say. It's the same problem that we have with a lot of these guys. They've got tons of money. They get connected to power. And then you realize, oh, shoot, they've actually not been the same person that they are in public that they are in private. This is the biggest issue that you're going to find. It doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left. The problem is the left doesn't seem to care. And the people that are in the kind of the uniparty don't seem to care either. They're willing to move people up. There used to be vetting in this nation where you'd be like, okay, these are the scandals that you might have. They would go and look back and say, okay, here's who you are. This is what you're all about. These are the problems you're going to face. Yes or no, are you willing for these all to be public? We're going to have a plan to get ahead of them. But in the era of digital and email, a lot of us that are in kind of my age bracket, if people went and they're hacking your email from like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and they're seeing what kind of a dude you were, like, why are you running for national office? Why are you trying to get out there in public? I get it that people are different and they change and they grow 100%. It'd be foolish if we didn't think that. But exposing yourself and therefore then like losing a state over this, especially like losing the governorship in that state, not ideal, particularly when it's like a purple state. This is some of those stuff that like North Carolina should be so hard red with all the military bases that are there. They crucify people in the public sphere so they don't have to go after them in the political sphere, and it ends up doing a pretty good job. And they want to hold, this is a rules for radical, a Saul Alinsky thing, like hold people to the standards that they claim that they have. Yeah, it's effective. All right, before we do our last story, let me say thanks to my buddies over at Catholic Vote. If you guys read the Loop today, you would see this article, catholicvote.org. Sign up for it. Faith, family, and freedom are the guiding principles for my friends over there. You can follow them on social media at Catholic Vote. It's at Catholic Vote or catholicvote.org. You can follow them on YouTube. You can follow them on Rumble, and I wish that you would. I hope that you do. And this story is quite good. The Jersey Girl. Talk about when your public principles don't align with the actual principles. This is another one of those things. It's actually pretty good. The Jersey Girl, the Navy has commissioned a new submarine, and it is built specifically to accommodate women. Now, how are they accommodating said women in the Navy, you wonder? I wonder that as well. They want to accommodate. It says, this is a spokesperson. This is Vice Admiral Robert Gauscher. He says the USS New Jersey was designed for two genders from the onset. Quite interestingly, this guy, Tom Basil, pointed out that the Navy has officially admitted that there are only two genders. How interesting. It was designed for two genders from the onset. And what does that mean? They've increased privacy in the washrooms and the sleeping areas. I have no beef with that. Neither do you. The access to the top bunks and overhead valves were also designed with height, reach, and strength of women in mind. Are you saying that women overwhelmingly are not as tall, not as strong, and are not able to reach and do things the way that men are? So we had to spend millions, let's say on the minimum, but probably billions of dollars to redesign and build a submarine so that it would accommodate women? Why not just hire men for the submarines we already have? Why do we need to do this experiment? And so, and I think maybe the most important thing was pointed out on Twitter. This lady says, what's this woman's name? Her name is, I think, Lori Boxer. Yeah, Lori Boxer says, while China and Russia are thinking about joining forces, and in many ways they are, this is what our military is supposed to be. It's supposed to be our projection of force across the globe. Iran is placing satellites in orbit, and they're drawing closer to nuclear capabilities if they don't have them already. We now have the Jersey Girl sub, the USS New Jersey. It's complete with weaker and easier to turn valves, paraphernalia from New Jersey, and an autographed Bon Jovi guitar. And you go, wait, what? It says, although the updates were made for practical use, there were other that were made overtly to emphasize a female presence on board the submarine. Its interior spaces are decorated with posters and memorabilia representing the state of New Jersey, including a signed guitar that was autographed by John Bon Jovi. This is what the Navy's spending their time doing. There was a poster. It was an old and it was a crappy poster in the barracks that I lived in when I was in Mississippi. I did a turn at Keesler Air Force Base, and it was one of the hardest trainings I did. I woke up every morning with a broken leg. I had a broken right fib. And I used to run on it and run faster than I'm capable of running. And it was truly awful. It was actually like torturous. I did it for, I think, 12 weeks, something like that. Maybe it was like 10 and a half or 11 weeks. There was a poster that was on our wall, and it said, just remember that your enemy is out living in substandard conditions and training every single day. And his whole and sole purpose in life is so that if he meets you, he will kill you. Train and live accordingly. Many of you have probably seen that in military barracks. I never had a John Bon Jovi guitar that was signed in our barracks. We had black mold. They condemned the building after I left. They'd condemned it before we got there. They uncondemned it so that we could live in it, and then they've uncondemned it again, as far as I know. I had a sand pit in the middle of the courtyard where we could be smoked until we were bloody and smoked where nobody else could see us or hear like the discomfort of log PT at all hours of the day or night. I've been called out at midnight on a Friday night and had a log put on our shoulders. I've done that. I never had anybody put up posters and memorabilia so that we could remember the redneck Riviera. What I remember was getting like sand in all the orifices because we were crawling around on the beach and getting sand kicked in our mouth and our face. And it was great, by the way. I would do it again. We got paid almost nothing for it. I remember pushing a bus down 90 manually with like 14 guys. It's pretty incredible to think that that's what we're going to spend our money and our military dollars on. I don't want you guys to forget what's coming up. We're coming into an election. They haven't shown any indication that they're going to be serious. We've got unserious things happening in the White House. We've got unserious thing happening in our military, ignoring real threats and making a gender-friendly submarine of all the things in the world. Submariners used to be always a pretty weird thing. They used to say 100 men would go underway, and 50 couples would come back up. I guess they could do that now, and they would be like totally heterosexual. It's a thing. Got a little piece from Kash Patel. I promised you that I would play this. I really like Kash. I've always liked Kash. He's always been smart and plain-spoken and said things that were honest, and I can't help but hear it. So this little thing went reminding us what has been done and why you don't fund your government, why a government shutdown is preferable. Because when you pay the government and you give them the money, they do this stuff, like the Russia hoax. Kash Patel kind of talking about the real issue, which would be nice if we could remember. And we'll end with a thought about COVID, which is not, I don't think they're done with us on this stuff. And Brett Weinstein kind of tipped his hand on that one over the weekend.
Just think about it. In the 21st century of the United States of America, did you think a political party would illegally spend campaign dollars to hire a foreign intelligence asset from overseas and funnel fake, false information into the Federal Bureau of Investigation, only to have them go to a secret surveillance court, lie to a federal judge, just so that they could illegally surveil their political opponent? And as the president says, they're coming after you. He's just standing in the way.
I'm not even sure that's true. I think they're coming after all of us. I think they're coming after us, and Donald Trump is one of the targets, but so are you. That's what I think. Because they've run away from the truth so aggressively, they can't help but remember the way things were, and they hope that you will just forget it. They hope that you're one of these low information people that's going to be confused by AI and therefore you need to be protected. They're one of these people. They think that they can just change the narrative on TV and you will also jump in line. This is a triple threat of Anthony Fauci, 2 times denying something. And then, of course, the fact that he actually did say these things. It's the same kind of problem that we just saw revealed by the Louder with Crowder investigations in New York City. The people that ran this. This is how they did it last time, folks. It's worked pretty well. Let me play this real quick for you. This is Anthony Fauci. You guys are going to be super shocked to find out that he doesn't say the truth.
First of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. And the record will show, Neil, that we didn't recommend shutting everything down. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences, which it
did. It devastated this country. And we're still dealing with those things. And of course, he was continued on underneath the Biden administration. They thought he was a hero.
But they're not done with you, right? Right. They are currently revising these injections to put them on the mRNA platform. If what I'm saying is true, then that is going to result in large numbers of people dying from heart pathologies that are going to be covered up because they can be. Right. So if they're not done with you, then it is a matter of, it is a matter of urgency that you look into this, not for social reasons, but for physiological reasons. You do not want to be damaged in this way. Yeah. And you need to.
That's Brett Weinstein talking about mRNA vaccines, talking about whether or not this whole story is over and done with, and I don't think it is either. It's the reason why censorship and AI and all this nonsense, it all reminds me that I don't need the government to do my thinking, and neither should you. Give me all of the information, mis, dis, and malinformation. Give me the AI, the things that are trying to mislead. Let me do my own reading and thinking, because that's what I was designed to do. Because it's a God-given right of ours to have this stuff and to be able to speak without having the government jump in and tell us what is safe for human consumption, safe for voter consumption, and try to make it up. At the end of the day, all I want to know is, Why does the other side not want to have a plan? I'm going to end with a little answer that is a non-answer, and then I'm going to give you a palate cleanser. Maybe the good thing that's come out of this. We did have some pretty fun impressions of Joe Biden that people were able to do. Dana Carvey did one the other day. On top of that, we're now getting Kamala impressions. And it turns out men do a pretty good job of doing a Kamala impression as well. So I'm going to wrap with that. Here is, what's your plan, Kamala? Can you tell this couple what your plan is?
We really would love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Yeah, first of all, thank you both for being here. And yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family, and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that.
We really would love to know.
That you have a right to aspirations and dreams. Apparently this woman is a big shocker to you, but she hasn't read the Constitution and doesn't know what rights you have in America. That shouldn't surprise anybody, but she continues to not have a plan. She continues to not have any policies. She wants to make fun of Donald Trump for saying he has a concept of a plan. All the things I've seen from Donald Trump are far more concrete than anything that lady has, which is why all of the parodies of her are about a lack of substance and making illogical claims. They're pretty good. I'm not going to lie to you. I enjoy it. Let me give you a 5-star review real quick. This one comes in. I'm not going to read all of it because it's quite long, but you can see it on the screen. This came in from Opens Wins, the wonderful Kyle Seraphin show. Kyle Seraphin brings a wealth of knowledge and unique perspective to his podcast. His background in law enforcement and intelligence dives into a wide range of topics: current events, political commentary, personal stories, historical analysis. The ability to break down complex issues into an engaging and understandable content makes his show informative and thought-provoking. Open Wins very much dug into the archives and liked our episode with Savannah Hernandez, the indomitable Savannah Hernandez, where we interviewed a tenacious reporter. She is that. She's a lovely person, too. Showcasing his knack for insightful and compelling discussions. Yeah. So thanks so much for a nice review. If you guys want to leave a review for us on Apple, I appreciate it. You can do so at Apple Podcasts. You can also do so on Spotify. You can do so on iHeartRadio, I believe. I haven't seen the iHeartRadio ones. Leave us a review. We'll read it on the show. Let me end with this thought, which is at least a little bit more fun than the previous things. This is a fantastic impression. You'll almost not know that this is a man doing it. It sounds just like Kamala to me, especially the sort of weird anecdote and the MK part. Spot on.
Before I answer that question, hold on, I have to address something, because you said something twice now that I have to address, okay? Do not tell Americans that Tim Walz and I are going to take your guns, okay? It's not true. We both carry, and in fact, I drove an armored tank to get to the debate tonight, okay? And I parallel parked it, which is not easy to do. There's no side view mirrors, okay? And they don't teach you that at tank school, okay? But I parked it, and then I fired a couple of shots from the cannon into the air, okay? And I did that to keep the rent down, okay? Because I'm looking around this town, and I see so much of the town I grew up in, okay? Hardworking, middle-class town that deserves affordable housing, that deserves tax cuts on small businesses, okay? And now let's take a Claritin so that we can be clear and understand what I mean by small businesses, okay? Miniature golf courses, okay? Tiny homes, the construction and the sale of them, and the little plastic hotels you put on monopoly boards, okay? These are small businesses, places a hardworking middle-class ant could go into, okay? And enjoy the crumb of a croissant on his lunch break, because he's working hard, the ant. You know ants? Okay, who here has ever seen an ant before? You know, with the 6 legs, and they're on the red and white blanket, and they're absconding with your picnic supplies. Okay, I love ants. I love ants, I really do.
If you guys like that kind of weird humor. By the way, he was spot on, and I think he was actually better than Kamala Harris. If that person was running for president. It would be far more interesting. Join us over on KyleSerafin.com. It's where our local channel is. I'll give you another plug for that. Locals is a community where we can interact, and we have some stuff that's behind a little bit of a paywall, and you can support the program, keep us independent. It's KyleSerafin.com. Thanks for joining us for today's show. Thanks for having a little bit of a laugh as we go into this weirdness. It's getting darker, and the Republicans keep caving. You guys get a choice. You get a choice pretty soon. Unfortunately, most of your choices have already been determined because we're not showing up for primaries and getting these clowns out. Go ahead and give them a call. Let them know what you think. You might as well. I'm not a huge fan of thinking that it's going to make a huge difference at this point because they've already said what they're going to do, but let them know you're unhappy. They should at least be a little bit uncomfortable about the fact that they are going to avoid a government shutdown, and the Democrats, again, the Democrats are praising it. Pretty gross. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. I'm sure this week will be fun in a bad way. There's no other way around it. Hang in there. God bless you. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.